Today we're going to be talking about conflict, and so we had put out an unscientific survey. Let's see if I can get this to go. There we go. The Unscientific Workplace Conflict Survey. And so I'm going to just quick run through what we learned from those of you who responded to the conflict survey. So the first question was around communication. And the management didn't fare well on this question. To compile this survey, I did do some research on workplace conflict and the most common causes. And I clumped them into categories when I sent them out into the survey. So one clump was around communication. And here you can see the tied for number one at 33%. That management makes a lot of decisions and changes that they do not communicate or ask people about, that creates havoc on the other end once it's implemented. And then the other communication problem with management is that they're not clear on the process they want used, the project deliverables they want accomplished, or the deadlines, whether to teams or to individuals. The next category was on work ethic. And so 33% of the conflict around work ethic in the workplace is coworkers who refuse to try anything new. And then after that is team members who spend their day flitting around talking and not really doing any work, which I find interesting because with our environment lately, we maybe aren't seeing each other flit around because we're working from home or we're isolated in our offices, but maybe there's just a suspicion that people are flitting around because they maybe don't appear to be productive, even though we can't see them. The next category was around collaboration and teamwork. So we know that we get better results when we do collaborate and work as teams, but that can also bring more conflict with it. So 29% said that conflict is caused when team members throw obstacles in the road and refuse to try new things, and 22% where everybody thinks they have the right answer to the solution. And I think both of these are opportunities where if you embrace the conflict, you'd be able to get a better result. So that may be part of what Jeanette talks today. I haven't seen her presentation though, so I'll be curious. And then meetings. Meetings in general get a bad rap. This is the highest thing, the 43%. Of people who do not speak up in meetings but spend the rest of the day complaining about what happened. This was our highest scoring cause of conflict on any of the survey questions. And then 36% are those who don't get a chance to talk because others monopolize. That one, number two, I think has been going on since the first meeting was ever invented. And then having trouble progressing. There we go. Culture in terms of defined by your workplace environment. And this one was pretty high too. 39% say it's by people who treat others disrespectfully. And then the coworkers who just have immediate negative reaction to anything new. We didn't gather demographics or anything on this unscientific survey. Sometimes change runs generationally, and workplace environment runs generationally, but we didn't collect any of that data, so I don't have any of that to share with you. But like I said, people seem to want others to be willing to change. And again, this is a 1 hour free webinar, so we won't be able to address all of these workplace conflicts in our webinar today, but we do have courses and training that would address all of these issues. So you can always contact me or our website, reach out on our website if you're interested in learning more about that kind of training. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that Jeanette can share hers. So the webinar today is being presented by Jeanette Grace. Jeanette is an instructor for the Institute for Professional Development, and we've worked together for 6 years or so. She is a communications expert. She also has supervision experience in her background, and so she understands communicating and leadership, and brings that to her training and facilitation of her courses at Metro State. And she's a Metro State alumni, so we always like to highlight that. And again, for those of you just joining us, we are recording today's session. If you missed last month on change, that's up on our website now for you to go view. And with that, Jeanette, I am turning it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beth. All right. Well, we are going to get started with helping you use conflict to build inclusiveness on your work teams and in your workplaces. So we're going to jump right in because we have 53 minutes until we want to send you on your way to get back to whatever it is that you have to do today. So I'm going to ask you to think about and put into the chat what word comes to mind when you think of conflict. What one word comes to mind when you think of conflict? And if you can just throw that in the chat. All right. And sometimes technology is always fun. And Beth, can you see the chat? Because I cannot see the chat.
I can see it, but let me put some glasses on to read it.
Okay.
So, trouble, uncomfortable, uncomfortable, argue, uncomfortable, disagreement, uncomfortable, arguments, differing opinions, avoidance, challenging, anxiety, opportunity, disagreements, argue, butting heads, toxic. I didn't get mine in there. Stress is mine.
Okay, that gives me a really good, oh, and now I can see the chat. Now the chat has popped up. Okay. And I saw a couple of things come in the Q&A too, and I see toxic and avoid there. So I have to be honest, I'm not surprised by what I see. And thank you, Beth, for sharing those. It is common that when we think of conflict, we immediately go to the negative, and we hope to help you reframe that. I did hear one in there that Beth read off that said opportunity. So let's explore that and maybe see if we can expand your thinking about what conflict is. I want to start here with what do we mean by inclusiveness? Because inclusiveness can mean many things, but the definition that we are going to be working with today in this webinar is about how do we value individual differences and make each other feel both welcome and feel accepted. And when we're talking about conflict, we don't have to necessarily agree. And often people think that, well, conflict is always a sign of disagreement. Well, yes and no. So, what our goal today is how do we use conflict to show that, yes, we do value individual differences, individual perspectives, and how do we do that in a way that makes other people feel welcome and accepted? So, let's start here with challenging. Yes.
Before you get too far along, can you just quick touch on if people have questions, do you want them to hold them to the end? Do you want them in chat? How would you like that? Or no questions?
You know what? Throw questions. If you want to throw them in the chat, and then Beth, if you see them or I see them, we can certainly entertain them, and we'll see, how many we can get to. So feel free to go ahead and throw them in the chat during the presentation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we're going to look at challenges of competing perspectives and this idea of combat versus conflict. So when we are thinking about those, let's start with combat and define it. Combat is positional argument. This is what makes people feel usually very uncomfortable. It's the butting of heads, as we saw in the chat. If we were to further define combat, we could say when we have a team of people or maybe even two people that are engaged in this positional argument or this combative behavior, what happens is that they are challenging each other's ideas. We also see that you get one or more person that wants to push their point of view, right? And I believe that that was one of the things that came out of the survey that Beth shared with you, that there are people who believe that their answer, their perspective, their opinion is the only one because it's the only right one. So in combat, you're going to see that show up. Combat is a lot of talking, a lot of making statements, sharing opinions, and that's part of pushing that point of view. So it's a lot of talking and not a lot of listening. When we're in combat, what we do is we reject other people's perspectives, and it will talk about where this comes from because there's actually something underneath that causes it. So somebody says, I like winter, you say, I like spring, winter is bad, and you're immediately rejecting somebody's perspective. When we're in combat, what we do is we focus on this, somebody has to be right. And usually it's we want to be the person who is right. So instead of seeking a solution or an option where everybody gets their needs met, we focus on getting our needs met by pushing what we believe is right. And when we're in conflict, we really want to think about, is it about right or wrong? Or is it about the best decision, the best outcome? Also, we'll see in combat, people want assimilation. They are comfortable where they are at. So they want everybody else to assimilate to their ideas. So, for example, one of the things that came out of the questionnaire that Beth shared was a comment about others flitting around during work time. And that was around work ethic. And each person has a way in which they conduct their work. I have a very distinct way of working. I am a hard worker. I'll work a lot of hours. I make sure I meet my deadlines. I will, work into the evening, but that doesn't mean everybody else is going to work in that same way. And if I expect everybody I lead or everybody I work with to assimilate to my way of working, what's going to happen is I'm going to create this combat, this, being positional. Sometimes we also describe combat as looking back. Now, let me delineate what I mean here. There are times when we are problem solving in the workplace and we need to look back to make sure we don't make the same mistakes. Absolutely. What I'm talking about here with combat is when you look back because you want to place blame, because you want to point fingers. And it's not about actually moving the team forward or moving the conversation forward. It's about getting stuck because if I use what happened in the past, then maybe I can force that I'm right. So now let's look at conflict. This is where I want to challenge that word that you think of when we think of conflict. Conflict is really just diversity of thought. And frankly, if everybody I worked with thought just as I did, I would be in a whole heck of a lot of trouble because I have blind spots. Not because I am a terrible human being, but because I am a human being, because I have a limited amount of knowledge. I have a limited amount of experience. So we really want to invite diversity of thought. And if we can think about differing perspectives as diversity of thought, we remove the threat that makes us want to dig our heels in and engage in that positional argument or that combat. So how are some ways we can describe conflict? It's mingling our ideas. It's exploring views. It doesn't mean you have to say yes or no, that you have to adopt a view, but it's at least exploring it, having dialogue and listening. So asking questions and listening to answers. Things like, well, why do you think that way? Or where did that information come from? Or help me understand why. It is seeking understanding. And when we seek understanding, what we're trying to do is really just get the pulse of where that person is at. Again, we're not saying that you have to agree with someone, but diversity of thought, we want to explore and seek, why is somebody saying X when we're saying Y? It's focusing on the solution. So conflict is about moving conversations forward to get to a solution, whatever it is that we're trying to solve. It is celebrating uniqueness, that there is diverse perspectives. There are diverse opinions, and we want to celebrate that those are unique. I, for one, can tell you, Beth and I have been working together for, gosh, I don't know, almost a decade, and we are very different in how we go about our work. But we celebrate that uniqueness because what Beth brings to the table is different than what I bring to the table. And then finally, it's about looking forward. Again, moving those conversations forward, looking into the future. How can we do it better? How can we have these conversations more effectively in the future? All right, so I'm going to share some information with you from this book. It's called Dealing with People You Can't Stand. Take the title in jest, but if you look at the subtitle there, it does say how to bring out the best in people at their worst. I'm going to share just the tip of the iceberg from this book. Recommend that you pick it up sometime if you are interested, but it's a great way for us to really frame the human behavior that causes combat and what we can do to try to stay in that place of conflict, that diversity of thought. All right, so here's what happens. There are threats. Whatever a threat is that you perceive, what is going to happen, because you are a human being, is that threat is going to cause you to protect or preserve yourself. So you may want to protect an idea. You may want to preserve your self-confidence. It could be a number of things, but these threats that we experience come in a few different forms. So there are emotional threats, things that really drive to our heart. So for example, an emotional threat could be, let's say you're having a discussion in the workplace on whether the president of the United States should have signed a stimulus check. Right? For some people, that's a really emotional threat because that money may make the difference whether they can pay their rent or not, for example. Then we also have cognitive threats, and that's what that image in the middle represents. So these are the things that in your head, you feel like maybe you're being challenged, that you're not performing to your best. So let's say, for example, you've taken the Strengths Finders, and you find out that responsibility is one of your strengths. It's not one of mine, but if responsibility is one of your strengths, you are a person who is going to follow through all the time to a fault. And if you don't follow through on something because something happens, then all of a sudden in your brain, you perceive that as a threat, right? You've let somebody down, right? Then the last category are physical threats. And how physical threats can happen in the workplace that can create combat is just body language, right? How is my body language different from your body language? I like strong eye contact. You don't like strong eye contact. So I think of that as a physical threat. Well, why wouldn't you make eye contact with me? Don't you respect me? And really what we're talking about here, whether it's emotional or cognitive or physical, is those are perspectives. Those are differences. What drives one person is not going to drive the next person. So what do we do with that? How do we know? How do we know what's driving someone? How do we know if we're creating threats that they're experiencing? So we're going to talk first about one type of intent, these are called. And again, this is from this book, Dealing with People You Can't Stand. There is an intent of people, how they go about their work is they are very much, they gotta get it done. In order to feel that they are getting it done, what they need is some level of control. These people are going to be fast-paced folks. They are going to be, let's check off the task list. Let's slow down the chit chat or get rid of the chit chat. We don't need that in the beginning of a meeting. And it isn't that anything is wrong with their intent or the way that they are working, but as soon as we come from a perspective or a point of combat, being positional, like, whoa, wait a minute, we need to stop and do X, or we need to slow down, that person perceives that as a threat, whether it's an emotional, a cognitive, or a physical threat. So, what's going to happen, their protection or their preservation might send them over to the combat side, right? They're going to start to push back, they're going to become positional. If we can stop and say, oh, this person's comment or their behavior is coming from a point of just wanting to get it done, then we can help to diffuse the threat. So we're being inclusive by understanding that their way of going about their day, their way of working is maybe different from ours. And it's not right or wrong. We're not going to focus on what is right here. It's just different. And I put the picture there of the control tower to represent that need control. Now, let me say this also about this intent of working. People who need control, that are get it done people, are not necessarily people who are trying to control you. What they're trying to do is feel in control themselves, but how that behavior comes off may feel controlling. So when I'm working with someone and they're a get it done need control, and that feels threatening to me, like maybe they're doing this to me when I'm talking, like, hurry up, Jeanette, go ahead and finish, that feels threatening to me. But if I can say, let's think about their perspective. Why are they doing that? If I can ask a question, right? If I can listen to their answer, and maybe their answer is, Jeanette, I got 5 minutes. I got to move on to my next meeting. Oh, now I get it. Now I can be inclusive with what they need instead of just taking it personally. All right, so that's one intent. The next intent, and I just want to watch the time, is a get along need approval. So these are folks that are going to want to say yes a lot, or maybe they're going to ride the fence, meaning they're not going to commit one way or another. So get along people, in order to really be productive, is they need to know that they have your approval. They have your stamp that yes, it is okay. So here's what I see happen sometimes with people that are coming from this perspective of working. If they feel that they are going to do or say something that will cause you to not get along or to lose your approval, then they're not going to say anything at all. They're not going to take the risk, or they're just going to tell you what you want to hear. So they will immediately feel a threat if there is any push or pull. If there's something you say and they feel that it's very different, they might not fight back. They might just be silent. So with get along need approval people, what I find is really helpful is to give them permission. Tell them you approve that they disagree. When we're thinking about problem solving, if you get the feeling that this person has a different idea of how you should go about something, this is the one I want to say to them, hey, I really want to hear your perspective, and I'm just going to listen because I want to make it safe for them. So that's another way of approaching work. Now, we've talked about two so far: the get it done need control, and the get along need approval. We can be both of these depending upon the situation. All right, there's a third one I want to talk about. This is the get appreciated need attention person. So get appreciated, this is the person who doesn't mind the spotlight. This is the person who wants to talk aloud in your meetings. And if they keep getting cut off, maybe by a get it done person, you may see more of that behavior. One of the things that came up in the survey that Beth talked about is people who monopolize meetings. This might be someone who's a get appreciated need attention person, right? They're monopolizing it because they have so much to say, because they want people to know that they exist. They want that recognition. So anytime they are ignored, anytime they are cut off, that's going to feel like a threat. They're going to protect or preserve, and they're going to do more to get attention. So when we put this in the context of conflict and combat, right? If I'm like, oh my gosh, that person is so annoying, they're always monopolizing the conversation, I'm stuck in combat. If I can step back and say, what does this person need right now? Maybe they need to speak without being interrupted. What's going to happen is I remove that threat. Therefore, they don't need to protect or preserve, and we stay in healthy conflict. We have dialogue that moves conversations forward. So it's their way of working. I want to include that. All right, then the last one, the get it right, need perfection. What's really important here is the word right, because I've talked about we don't want to fight for being right. I use the word right because that is what the authors use. However, what we're really talking about is getting it correct. There are people that their perspective is it has to be 100%. We need to get it correct. And they need to feel like it is perfect to feel that they are doing their work as they should. Or they see something as very black and white. This is correct or right. This is not correct or right. So we want to build space for these people to explore. And I'll see a lot of exclusion when we have, for example, maybe a get it done person who's very fast paced, right? They want to get it done. And the get it right person is putting on the brakes and saying, hey, hang on a minute, let's slow down. I need more time. Let's ask more questions. So what I'm going to do is throw up a poll here, and I would like to know which describes you best. Now, we can be all four depending upon a situation, but usually there's one that really resonates with people. So I am going to launch that, and you can go ahead and vote. It's always fun to see these come in because it's like a what's it called? A ticker tape, maybe. All right, we have about 70% of people who have voted. So I'm going to leave this open just for a little bit longer. I'm watching the time. Okay. If you have not voted, please vote now because I'm going to end the polling in about 5 seconds. Okay. Let me share the results with you. So just interesting here is that the highest majority by just a titch are the get along, need approval folks. So you are people that maybe feel like you don't always have a voice and it's hard to push your voice. So my recommendation to you is to assert yourself, to advocate for what you need in a respectful way, diversity of thought. Hey, I have another opinion that I think will help the team. I'd like to share that opinion. Close behind it is get it done, need control. For those of you who feel like maybe that's the way that you work, be aware that you may exclude people sometimes by being, how's the saying go? The bull in the china shop, right? That you're pushing hard. It's your timeline. Your timeline is right, but somebody else's timeline is different, right? That's a different perspective. So we want to be able to respect all of the timelines and try to come to a place that works for everyone. Now, I'm not saying if you're the boss, sometimes you just have to call the hard shots, make the tough decisions. Right? Then we have the get it right, need perfection folks. Be willing sometimes to speed up a little bit, to accept that not everything has to be 100%, and see if that can help to create some inclusiveness as well. And then I see just one person there that said they're get appreciated, need attention. And I have an affinity for you because I am most often a get appreciated, need attention person. So my advice to you from my own experience is practice listening. Practice listening. All right. So thank you for sharing that. A reminder that you can be all of those. But when we're talking about building inclusiveness, what I want to encourage you to do is when you feel a threat and you want to protect or preserve, be aware what that's going to do is maybe cause you to move into a combative state. If you feel like you are in that combative state, then recognize what it is you need. Do you feel you need some control? Do you feel you need to, it needs to be perfect? Do you feel you need attention? Do you feel you need approval? And then be able to advocate for what you need, because that's going to help other people create an environment of inclusiveness. And then if we reverse that, if you perceive somebody else as experiencing a threat and they're protecting or preserving and they're in that combative positional place, try to identify what it is they need. And if you don't know what they need, ask them. Ask them a question. Would it be helpful if XYZ? Try to take some action and see if you get it right. And if you don't hit the target, try something else. Have dialogue about it. Because even if you stop and you say, okay, this conversation isn't going in the direction that I think either one of us want it to, help me understand what you need right now. That alone is going to build inclusiveness. All right, so let's go here to movement, to position versus interest. So how can we get there? I'm going to talk about two things. One is position. That is what a person says that they want. So it's kind of their stance, their viewpoint, right? This is the way that it is. Underneath that position, what drives it is their interest. That's why a person wants it, right? That underlying concern, their underlying goal. And I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples here so you can see what I mean, so that you can use this to build inclusiveness in a way that keeps you in healthy conflict. All right, so again, this is what we're dealing with. We're valuing individual differences and we're making each other feel welcome and accepted. So it starts here with position. We state our position. I think winter is great. You think spring is great. That is a position, but there's a reason why I think winter is great, and there's a reason why you think spring is great. But as long as we continue our dialogue with winter's better, no, spring is better, winter is better, no, spring is better, we can't get anywhere. And we are going to build an exclusive environment. So we want to drill down to the interest, the reason why I really love winter and the reason why you love spring. And through that, we're able to drill down to the inclusiveness. And it's where we start to look for some crossover or some understanding that we build that inclusiveness. So let me give you an example. Let's say, this is something we can probably all relate to, that you have someone you live with and they say, let's order takeout. And you say, actually, no, I want to eat at home tonight. Okay, that's position. And as long as you continue to say, no, I want to eat at home, and they say, no, let's order takeout, you're probably going to starve. You're not going to order anything, or it's going to become very combative and you're just going to eat what you want. Let's drill down. Why does that other person want to order takeout? Well, because they want convenience. Maybe they've worked a really long day and they're tired. But you want to eat at home because you see that it is a healthier option, that eating out is unhealthy. That's where you have the conversation. That's where the healthy conflict, the diverse perspectives exist. That's what you discuss. So can we figure out, how can we eat something healthy that is also convenient? And we figure out from there, oh my gosh, let's order food from a place that has salads and gluten-free pasta. Now we have both convenience and we have eating healthy. Okay, so that's an example we can probably all relate to. Let's go to a workplace example. Again, using this definition of inclusiveness. We value individual differences and we make each other feel welcome and accepted. This is when we talk about diversity, In the workplace, one of the things that we're dealing with are different generations. So let's say somebody takes the position that millennials are very progressive and they just want to be heard in the workplace. They just want a voice. But your position, we're going to kind of make you the, feeling like you're on the outside here, the less inclusive person. Your position is millennials are entitled, and you know what? They just think that they know everything. They always have the answers. Okay, as long as you and I stay in that space, and that's what we argued. No, they're progressive. They just want to have a voice. No, actually, you know what? They're entitled. They just think they know all the answers. We cannot get anywhere. And we are not including each other's perspectives. We are creating a very exclusive conversation. So let's drill down. Maybe this person, their goal, they're interested in hearing from millennials because they want to find the best way to get work done. And that's why they take that position. I want to hear from millennials because I want to find the best way to get work done, and they might have something of value to add. And we drill down to your position and we find that, you know, it's uncomfortable for you. The threat is you're being challenged to work differently. And what you really feel is that you can do it easier and faster the way that you've always done it. So this kind of came up to people that won't change, right? They won't try anything new. Well, maybe what this person really believes is that they've found the easiest, fastest way to do something. And when a millennial says, no, hey, let's do it this way, they're like, whoa, time out. That feels like a threat. And we're creating this exclusive environment. So if we can have that conversation, where I see the crossover here is you've got two people that want to get the work done and they want to do it well and they want to do it quickly, efficiently. So maybe what we do then to be inclusive is we make a list of pros and cons to both approaches. And then we make a decision on how we're going to do the work. And the magic that happens there is that if I'm the person that's very, for lack of a better word, anti-millennial, through this, if I can see both the pluses and the minuses to their way of working, I might be more open to changing the way that I work. But somebody needs to help me get there. So that's how we use positions and interests to be able to build inclusiveness. We have to get down to the interest. That's where the healthy conflict lives. That's where the diversity of thought gets to get discussed. If you stay up in your position, you're going to stay in a combative nature and you cannot move things forward. And you're going to have people working against one another. So here are 10 tips to promote inclusiveness. 1, we've got to listen to understand, not listen to respond, not listen to reply, but listen to understand. And this means that we're probably going to have to ask some more questions. And when we listen, I recommend we listen more because most people I find struggle with listening. It's a hard skill. It's an extremely difficult skill. And listening is not just not talking. Listening is really trying to understand somebody else's perspective and not having to agree with it, but just understand where they are coming from. All right, I said this, ask questions, ask good questions, not questions to trip people up, but help me understand why, or can you explain? Is there an example you can share of that? Where did that information come from? That really, those questions are used to seek understanding. Let go of assumptions. Assumptions that this person is working against you, that this person wants to be right, that this person is someone who won't try new things. I'm looking at my notes from what Beth said. This is someone who monopolizes, that this is someone who has a negative reaction to any time something new is introduced. If you let go of that assumption for a moment, and you explore, you stay in that healthy conflict and you explore, you just might be surprised. Acknowledge differences. Doesn't mean we don't have to talk about them, right? Name the elephant in the room. Hey, I'm a person that wants appreciation, and you are a person who wants to get it right. Boy, that makes it difficult for us to work together. So let's figure out how we can do it. Call out exclusion, but do it respectfully. And when we're respectful, we're speaking in language that is a way that we empower all people involved in that interaction, on that team, if it's a one-on-one in that organization. So as Beth said, use HR. If you have a D, E, and I person in your organization, those are the people we need to be talking to when it comes to the things that are very emotionally charged. And if there are things that you feel you can handle on your own, call it out with that person. Have a conversation with them. Maybe don't call it out publicly, because sometimes that doesn't feel respectful, right? Forgo any generalizations like millennials are, or this group of people is, or that department is, or always, or never, because those always feel threatening to the person who's receiving that communication. All right. Invite opinions, invite sharing. Hey, I'm curious. How would you handle this? How do you see this? What haven't we thought about? A really good tool, if you've never heard of it, is the 6 Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono, because what it does is it really encourages everybody to think differently, right? So that their opinions can morph. But in general, on a team, we want to invite opinions. We want to invite sharing. And if you have certain people that aren't speaking up, those are the people maybe we need to pay attention to, inviting them to share more. Because if they're not speaking up, it could be a sign that they're feeling excluded. Right? Refrain from embarrassing or penalizing each other. There's a lot of work that has been done over the past, I would say almost 30 years, maybe even more, around psychological safety in the workplace. And what we know is that when there is not psychological safety, people cannot do their best work. And when we embarrass people or we penalize people for sharing their opinions that we don't necessarily agree with, we create an environment that shuts people down. They stop sharing. They stop asking questions. They stop trusting. So as soon as you have embarrassed someone or penalized someone, maybe that's ignoring them after a meeting, what happens is you've created an environment that is the opposite of being an inclusive environment. And then this one, we don't often talk about success enough, but openly celebrate success. So when you have been inclusive, recognize that, recognize how that happens. Talk about it on your teams, because that is going to perpetuate the behavior. When you have been in a position or positional, and you've been in that state of combat that is creating exclusiveness, and you are able to get to a place where you get to interests and you are in healthy conflict, where you are honoring diverse perspectives, celebrate that as well, because that shows progress. And as you celebrate success, again, you perpetuate the behavior. Right. So with this thought, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A here. This came from Loretta Lynch. She's a former attorney general, and I thought it was a really great quote. Let us not act out of fear or misunderstanding, but out of the values of inclusion, diversity, and regard for all. Because it's that fear and that misunderstanding, again, that causes the threat, that causes us to protect or preserve, that causes us to be in that space of combative positional behavior. And as long as you stay in combative positional behavior, you're going to be creating environments that are very exclusive. So we want to do the opposite. So with that, we'll open it up to some Q&A, and you could throw them in the chat, or you can certainly put them in the Q&A.